This is a 2004 Rolls-Royce Phantom, and it was the ultimate luxury car 20 years ago. These days, it's still pretty damn ultimate. It has a road presence like almost nothing else on the planet. But the difference is now you can get one of these a lot cheaper than you could back then. And it is a lot of car for the money. And today, I'm going to review the Phantom and show you everything. Before I get started, big news, this Phantom is currently for sale, being auctioned live on Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website. This Phantom has low miles, a lot of equipment, and a big, smooth V12, and you can buy it on Cars and Bids. So, once you've finished watching this video, click the link in the description to head over to the live auction for this Phantom, and you can bid on it and buy it on Cars and Bids. So let's talk Phantom. Although Rolls-Royce has used the Phantom name at various points throughout its history, the Phantom that everybody knows is this one, the 7th generation model, which came out for the 2004 model year. When this car debuted, it was a revolution. The first Rolls-Royce under BMW ownership with massive sizing and incredibly opulent styling. Back when this Phantom was new, it probably had a sticker price of around $350,000. And that's in 2004 money. These days, a brand new Phantom can cost over $600,000 with options. But an older model like this one is a lot cheaper than that. You can pick one up in the $100,000 to $120,000 range, and you can't even get a new S-Class for that. Makes this a lot of car for the money. And today, I'm going to show you everything you get for that money. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the Phantom and show you all the quirks and features of this ultra-luxury sedan. Then, I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a DOUGSCORE. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the 04 Phantom with getting in, and that means starting with the key, which is a little bit interesting. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is the first Rolls-Royce that was made under BMW ownership. This car didn't share that many parts with BMWs, but it did share the key, as you can see here. If you had a BMW from this era, you recognize this key. The button on top is an arrow pointing up, that unlocks the doors. The RR logo, that locks the doors. It was a BMW logo on BMW keys, and this square near the bottom, that opens the trunk. Again, not a lot shared with BMWs, but that key was a very clear item showing these two cars had the same parent company. But when it came to getting in this Phantom, undoubtedly the most interesting thing is the doors. The front door is pretty normal. It just opens normally, nothing weird about that. But the rear door is rear hinged. You pull on the door handle and it opens up the opposite way of normal. Now, most people call this suicide doors. Rolls-Royce called it coach doors in order to class things up a bit, but this is what it did. Now, these days, Rolls-Royce models all have these coach doors, and it's become kind of a Rolls-Royce hallmark, but this is the car that started this in the modern era, the rear-hinged coach door in back. And this Phantom started another tradition that is carried on to many more Rolls-Royce models, and that would be the umbrella mounted inside the rear door. You can see it here. You push this button and the umbrella pops out, allowing the chauffeur to get the umbrella out of the door before the chauffeured passenger climbs out of the car. That really was the thinking, that the chauffeur would have easy access to an umbrella, so the chauffeured passenger never had to get wet or wait for an umbrella to be brought out, since it's right there in the door. Again, this feature now in most modern Rolls-Royce models, and it started here. But anyway, next up, with the doors open, you climb inside the Phantom. I'm going to start up front, where the very first thing you notice when you get in here is the floor mats. That's because they are lamb's wool floor mats, incredibly supple and luxurious. You just want to lie on them and run your hands through them because they feel so wonderfully comfortable. These floor mats are probably best enjoyed with your shoes off, being chauffeured around in the back, feeling the lamb's wool at your toes. And of course, throughout this interior, there are a lot of cool luxury treats like that. For example, in the center of the dashboard, in the center console area, you can see this clock, this old school, beautiful analog clock, which is very nice. But it's a bit of a surprise. There's no screen in here. You would think a car this expensive from this era would at least have a navigation system, and indeed it does. If you open up this wood panel in the center console, the controller pops out for the navigation system, and at the very same time, automatically the clock rotates backward and reveals the navigation screen. So every time you pop out the controller, the screen is shown to you. Now, if you don't want to see the screen there, you just press this high quality silver switch, and then the clock rotates back into place and provides you with a more traditionally luxurious interior without some modern screen messing it all up. But anytime you want to see the screen, just open up the controller for it or press this silver button and it pops open, which is a cool party trick. And that screen is by no means the only hidden item in this car. For example, the seat controls. Where are they? They're not on the side of the seat where most cars have them, and they're not on the door where a lot of other cars have them. So how do you control the seats here? Well, they're in this panel. Push this little silver button, pop it open, and you can see the seat controls, and they operate very bizarrely. The way it works is you highlight the part of the seat that you want to adjust, and once you've done that, you move the little silver joystick to actually adjust the seat. This is straight out of high-end BMWs from this era, and it's quite bizarre, but this is how you adjust the seats in the Phantom, driver and passenger. They don't have any visible controls. And by the way, this center console area where the seat controls are, you can see there's another silver button behind that. You push that and it pops open this lid and reveals a storage area. I mention this because it's actually quite annoying. This is an armrest with buttons facing up. So if you put your arm on it and your elbow hits those buttons, these lids pop up. It's not really very good design, and it's kind of interesting that they did that. But anyway, next up, another fantastic hidden item in this interior is behind this wood panel. You push it, and then you are ceremoniously, slowly provided, well, a lid, which you then have to open. And once you open that, you can see two things. One, a little storage compartment, but also a telephone dial pad. If you got this car with the integrated telephone option, and of course you did, being a big spender in the early 2000s, then the integrated phone could be dialed from this pad. All you had to do was push on this wood panel and it would pop out and you could make a call, which is pretty cool. And speaking of controls up front, there are some rather interesting controls, some quirky ones, if you will, in this interior. For one thing, this giant dial in the center here, this is your radio volume. You just turn it and that adjusts your radio volume. The absolute middle of the dashboard, this focal point, kind of interesting. And the especially unusual part about this dial is it's wrapped in leather lined around the entire side. So your hands can feel the high quality surface of leather even when you're just making a simple volume adjustment to the stereo, which is excellent attention to detail. Now, next up, another interesting and rather quirky control in this interior, that would be the climate controls directly below this volume knob. To adjust the air temperature of the climate control, you move these like dials from blue to red. The more blue you have showing, the colder the air. The more red you have showing, the warmer the air, and it is rather strange. Now, right below that, you have the fan speed adjustment dial, and once again, you can see it is wrapped in leather. So once again, even when you're simply adjusting the fan speed, you can still feel the high quality touch of leather on your fingertips. And indeed, that's kind of a theme in this car. Everything is ultra high quality, even stupid, basic, simple controls. For instance, the hazard light button. You can see here, it's this gorgeous aluminum weighted button instead of a simple plastic switch they hide somewhere. They even made the hazard light button beautiful. On the door panel, the window switches are all beautiful aluminum. They feel great to touch. And even the power mirror control, which you rarely use, every aspect of that is aluminum. The little switch that adjusts which mirror you're controlling and the joystick that controls the mirror itself, very beautiful, very weighty aluminum that just feels fantastic, even for such a simple minor control. And that was even carried over to the glove box opener. You push this beautiful silver button And the glove box open, something so simple, is actuated by such a high quality button. Now, you can see above that glove box opener button, you have another beautiful silver button, this one with a keyhole. If you push that, it opens the upper glove box. You have two glove boxes in the Phantom. The upper glove box is the more interesting one because it contains some rather unusual controls, such as the hood ornament. Yes, that's right, the hood ornament in this car is controllable. It's adjustable. You can make it go up or down. This is the famous Rolls-Royce Spirit of Ecstasy Flying Lady hood ornament. If you press the up arrow from this control in the glove box, you will see the Spirit of Ecstasy actually shoots up from the top of the grille and reveals itself to the world. If you push down, the Spirit of Ecstasy goes down, retreats back into the top of the grille, allowing you to be slightly more stealthy. And there's even an automatic and a manual mode for the hood ornament. If you put it in automatic, then every time you turn the car on and drive it, the hood ornament goes up. When you turn the car off and park it, the hood ornament goes back down automatically, or you can set it to manual and do it all yourself. Now, you might be wondering why? Why would anyone do any of this? Why would you put your hood ornament up or down? And I guess the theory is, if you don't want the hood ornament to get stolen, you can put it down, or if you want some subtlety in this car, you could put it down. Although there's really no way to get subtle in this car. The hood ornament being up or down isn't going to change the fact that you're driving a massive gargantuan Rolls-Royce, but still maybe they think it helps a little. But anyway, next up, a few other interesting and quirky items in the front of the Phantom. For one, you don't have a tachometer in the gauge cluster. Instead, you have a dial that is marked Power Reserve, and it shows you exactly how much power you have remaining. So it's 100% when you're sitting here at idle, but if you rev it, then obviously you're using some power and you have less remaining. It sort of functions like a tachometer, but just a little bit different since it's a Rolls-Royce. And by the way, speaking of the gauge cluster, another interesting item here, when you put on the turn signal, it doesn't show you which turn signal is on. There's just a generic light that comes on letting you know one of the turn signals is on. I'm surprised to see that here. It was an old school detail. A lot of older cars had it, but by the early 2000s, everyone would show you which turn signal you were using, but not the Phantom. Sort of a retro throwback in their turn signal light. Also interesting up here, another nice luxury touch. Over on the passenger side of the dashboard, this upper section has Phantom inlaid into the wood, which is very beautiful, looks quite nice. Another subtle touch in this interior is the horn, which isn't like a button or a pad on the steering wheel that would be ugly or out of place. Instead, these spokes of the steering wheel are just simply the horn, kind of integrated into the spokes so you wouldn't really know it's there and it doesn't have to look obvious. Also, one other neat luxury touch up here, the sun visors are trimmed in leather, of course, as you might expect, but also in leather is this little mini sun visor that covers the space above the rear view mirror. Most cars don't even have that. Of course, the Phantom does, and of course it is trimmed in leather because no expense was spared in this interior. But anyway, next up we move on to the back seat in the Phantom, which is of course a nice and luxurious place to be. The first thing you notice when you open the door back here is that the back seat looks like a couch. You can see a bench seat and it actually has armrests on both sides like a love seat or an overstuffed leather couch, I guess to kind of give it an old-fashioned feel, and certainly it is luxurious and it feels nice sitting on this rear seat couch. Now, another interesting item back here, once you get inside, you want to close the door, there's a button for that. This little button mounted by the rear window, you press it and the door automatically closes itself, which is a very luxurious touch. This is another feature that has become very common on new Rolls-Royce models. It is their signature feature now, and this car debuted it, doors that close with the push of a button. Anyway, next up, some other nice luxuries back here. One, you have a little mirror off to the side on either side of the back. You can see this mirror here, I guess, to check out how you look before an important business meeting that you're being chauffeured to. Kind of an interesting placement for a mirror. Now, at the bottom of this mirror, you can see there's a little light, like a vanity light, and you can turn that on, and that's kind of an Art Deco look to it, kind of cool. Not really all that functional, but it is a neat look, and it does light up the mirror area a little bit to help you look at yourself. Now, interestingly, the rear armrest back here is not full of controls like in some cars. You can see you put it down, it is just an armrest. A very nice overstuffed leather armrest that feels good, but an armrest nonetheless. However, there are still controls in the back seat of the Phantom. For one, you have heated rear seats, which you can turn on with these little controls mounted sort of below the seat base. Turn them on and you can adjust the amount of heated seat. Now, below the heated seat controls, you can see there is a wood panel with a beautiful silver button. You might think something gorgeous is lurking back there, but actually it's just cup holders. You press it, pops open, and you can put your drinks there. Again, a gorgeous button switch panel for a relatively simple item. Now, other controls in the back are mainly climate controls, which you can see here. Again, the same little dials, blue and red, to adjust temperature like you had in the front, and you also have your fan speed controls back here, again, wrapped in leather to be as luxurious as possible. Now, interestingly, with the rear of this interior, you do have several different climate vents to get as much air as possible on the rear passengers and make them as comfortable as they can be. You have two here in the center. These little circles are climate control vents, as you can see. You have more on the door pillars next to the front seats. These are also climate control vents that can blow air at you. And you even have climate control vents below the front seats. This is a common placement for climate vents in cars, but in the Phantom, they are beautiful aluminum climate vents. Even though you'll never really see them, they're kind of hidden out of place, they still have to look great. And speaking of high quality items back here, ashtrays. Of course, high quality ashtrays. They're mounted on the door panels, one on each side. You lift up this beautiful silver lid, and there is your beautiful ashtray, so you can smoke while being chauffeured along in the back of your Phantom. Even the grab handle to help you get out of the car is gorgeous. In your car, it's just some plastic thing above the window. In this, it's leather and aluminum trimmed, and it swings down to allow you a full range of motion to make it easy to get out, so you always have a luxurious experience. But you might be thinking, well, if that's the grab handle back here, how do you like hang clothes or hang a coat in the back, since that swings down and it would fall off? Well, Rolls-Royce has thought of that. This car has individual coat hangers. You tap here, the coat hanger deploys, and you can use that to hang your coats and use the grab handle for grabbing. And finally, our last interesting item in the back seat of this car is the SOS button. A lot of cars have an SOS button you can press if you're in an emergency, and it is always in the front seat area. You get into an accident, you need directions, you can push that button, and then some telematics system will connect you to someone and they'll talk to you. In this car, that button is placed in the middle of the ceiling. So not only can the front passengers reach it if there's an emergency, but the rear passenger can also press the button if you're being chauffeured along and you no longer trust your chauffeur. You can press SOS from back here. Never seen that before. And next up, we move on to the trunk in the Phantom, which I will open by pressing the button on the key fob, hold it down, and it opens up automatically, because of course it does. Now, the trunk is not particularly interesting or exciting. It is largely just a trunk, although it is carpeted for a high-class cargo experience, like you might expect from the Phantom. There are two somewhat unusual items that I want to point out. One, I love that the label showing you where the first aid kit and the emergency stuff is here embroidered stitching on leather. A lot of cars would just have a label there. Some cars would even have a sticker. This car, even for that stuff, the first aid kit, emergency equipment, embroiders it into the leather for a classy experience, even if you're looking for your first aid kit. Now, under that panel in the trunk is, of course, your first aid kit and emergency like tire changing equipment, but more interesting is the other panel. You lift that up and you can see additional storage under here. So if your trunk space is not sufficient in the Phantom, well, you do have extra storage under the trunk floor, which is kind of nice. But anyway, next up, since I'm on the outside of the Phantom, I want to cover the most obvious exterior item, which is the way this car looks. Very distinctive design, but especially distinctive because of just how massive it is. In height, the Phantom was only 2 inches shorter than a Honda CR-V when it first went on sale. This is a sedan, and it was only 2 inches shorter than the Honda CR-V crossover back in 2004. In length, this is 2 feet longer than a Mercedes S-Class. 2 feet is a huge number in the car world, and the S-Class is not a small vehicle. This was massively longer and taller and huger than everything else, and it commanded a gigantic presence. Curb weight, this came in around 5,500 pounds, which was about 1,500 pounds more than an S-Class. Again, another high-quality luxury sedan that wasn't exactly lightweight, but this was massive. And really, the road presence that this car has, even almost 20 years after it came out, is bested by basically no other car except maybe newer Phantom models. Now, other interesting items on the outside, one is the wheels. This car is very famous for having a cool party trick with the wheels, namely the RR emblem in the wheels is weighted. So as you drive along, the wheel rotates, but RR always stays upright. You can see it here. The car is moving, the wheel is moving, but RR isn't. So everybody knows what you're driving. And next up, another interesting exterior item with the Phantom. I want to talk headlights, because I've always wondered what exactly is going on here. You have this upper piece, like a rectangle, which looks like a normal headlight, and then you have this giant circle below that. So how does it all work? Well, it turns out that at the ends of the rectangle on top, those are your turn signals, and they turn on, look just like normal turn signals, nothing weird there. The headlight part of this is actually the circle down below. Turn on your headlights and those turn on. They're not fog lights, they are your regular headlights. Then when you want to turn on your high beams, your bright lights, they're also the circle. Just a brighter light comes out of the circle when you turn on your high beams. So that circle functions as both your headlights and your high beams. So you might be wondering, what exactly does the rest of this rectangle do on top? And the answer is that's like a running light, sort of a dim little light that's always illuminated while you're driving around, just as like a standard, simple driving light. All the real headlight functions are down below in the big circle. Kind of a strange headlight situation, but that's how it worked on the original Phantom. And finally, we move under the hood and you can see the engine in the Phantom. This massive car has an equally massive engine to power it. This is a 6.75 liter V12. It makes about 450 horsepower and about 530 pound-feet of torque. Those were strong numbers back in 2004. They're still pretty strong today, especially because almost all of the torque was made down low to help move this giant vehicle. 0 to 60 for the Phantom was in the high 5-second range, 5.7 seconds, which is a pretty good number considering this car isn't about 0 to 60. It's a luxury sedan, performance isn't its thing, and yet it was still a reasonably decent performer. Now under the hood, this engine, I love the way it looks. It is beautiful under here, luxurious and elegant, even under the hood, with Rolls-Royce on the top and V12 6.75 liter in the center, reminding you just how special this car is, even under the hood. And so, those are the quirks and features of the 2004 Rolls-Royce Phantom. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the original Phantom. Now this isn't really the original Phantom. The first Phantom came out in like the 20s, but it was always like a really, really low production car. It was kind of the top of the line. Well, they only made a few hundred of them here and there. In 2004, they came out with this, and it was sort of like the Rolls-Royce, and that's when it really became the Phantom, you know, and that's the Phantom that everybody really knows. So, how does this car drive? Well, 20 years later, this car is relatively low miles, about 35,000 miles, so it's not that crazy by some Rolls-Royce standards. It drives pretty well, if I do say so myself. It is nice and luxurious, just like it was back then, I have no doubt, and it still isolates you completely and totally from the sounds of the outside world, and it still feels like riding on a cloud. And it is just incredibly quiet. You don't hear engine, you don't hear road, tire, none of that stuff. It is incredibly luxurious and calming in this interior. Now, I was reading some reviews from when this car came out, and there were some complaints about the steering being over-assisted, and I totally agree. It's way over-boosted. It's not that it doesn't feel confident, it just, the way that it rotates isn't very precise. There's not too much feel to it when you're driving along. It's a big lumbering vehicle without much steering feel. but boy, is it a nice luxury ride. And it's amazing to me, even 20 years later, this still feels just as nice as some of the very nicest luxury cars on the market. Now, one interesting thing about this car, it's a pretty nice Phantom. A lot of the early Phantoms, as they got cheaper, were neglected more and more and more. And this car has a few issues. The airbag light is on, there's some stuff with the rear door locks, but mostly this is a pretty nice car. Some of these have super high miles. They were abused by people who couldn't afford to take care of them. This is an expensive car to own. It is a lot of car for the money. It is a relatively cheap car to buy, but to own and maintain and run, it is not a cheap vehicle. So don't go into it thinking that it will be. But if you get one that has been at least relatively well maintained and doesn't have an enormous amount of deferred maintenance, you can maybe avoid having to do a lot of stuff once you buy it, and this car generally feels like that. It feels nice, feels smooth, the engine feels smooth, sounds good. I mean, this is just a nice car. It drives well. Oh, it is oh so comfortable in here. And another really big benefit about this car, you spend, I don't know, 100, 110, 120 grand, that's what these go for, and everybody thinks you're the biggest baller in the history of the world. I've had so many people come up to me while I was filming this video, even here in Orange County in Southern California, which has a lot of really nice cars, and say, wow, that is so cool, or notice it or take pictures or whatever. And for people who really want to kind of show off, this is probably the best way to do that for $100,000. Few cars attract the attention of Rolls-Royce. And frankly, even the new Phantom doesn't look that different from this Phantom. And so you still do get people, you will get people thinking that you have the coolest, most expensive, most insane car. Frankly, for a long time, that's what this was. And it still drives like it. And I'll tell you, when you're sitting back here looking out over that long hood and you see that hood ornament, you just think you're the coolest person on the planet. And he might be. Now, I will say from a performance perspective, this car isn't that. I floor it here, and it's quick. It's quicker than you'd think it would be. It hauls pretty well, actually. But like, it's sort of a slow acceleration, even though it's somewhat fast, if that makes sense. There's not much like excitement behind it. It's not like throwing you back in your seat. It's fine, it does well, it's quick enough, and it's quick enough to have good performance for a car at this price point, but it's not some like insane, exceptional thing, and you're not gonna be really blown away by performance. That's not the point. The point is it performs well enough, sufficient, or adequate, as Rolls-Royce used to say, but the real joy comes from this like puffy cloud, all your troubles are outside in a different plane of the universe than when you're sitting in here, and it is so luxurious. And so that's the 2004 Rolls-Royce Phantom. I love driving this car. It's so supple and comfortable, and the road presence is truly unbelievable. Unfortunately, it is not as affordable to own and maintain this car as it is to buy, but if you have the funds to keep it going, this is a real treat, and you can buy this one on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give the Phantom a Doug score. And the Doug score is here, 62 out of 100, which places the Phantom here against other relevant cars. Not at the top since it's not brand new, but reasonably close to contemporaries like the Bentley Mulsanne and the original Phantom Drophead, which I've also reviewed. Truthfully, the Phantom is a fantastic car, incredibly luxurious and opulent, and a lot of car for the money, but the drawback is running costs, and you have to go in knowing a highly expensive car commands some highly expensive repair bills.